Tuesday, and we skipped one, so this is the second time this week. And it's the 11th of December? 11th of December. Oh, 11th. I think it's 11th of December. Okay?
Yeah.
And we just finished Hanukkah, so we're Gimel Tevis. And this is Parashat Vayigash, and it's the second class, even though it's Tuesday. Okay. So we started by Laket Yosef et Kol HaKesef. We began talking about what it means that Yosef gathered all the silver, all the money together. And what we saw last time, we began to see this, is that there's two types of love. There's love that comes out of a person's nature, and it's called Ahava Mesuteret. It's hidden love, concealed love, and it's the main topic of the Tanya. And there's love that comes out of a person's understanding, out of what he learns and what he understands about the world. And as the Rambam writes, when a person learns and understands how the world functions, and he comes to love the Creator. In Chassidus, this is explained a little bit differently. It says that you don't really have to go out and look into science, because that was the old way. And it used to be that when they looked at the world, they did discover the Creator. That's why there were so many types of idolatry. It's basically the idolatry was focusing and separating one force out of all the forces in the world and saying that this is God, this is our God. So that used to be the old way, that they used to look at nature. Today, when a person looks at nature and he reads Nature, or he reads Science, or whichever journal he reads, you won't find very much mention of God. You might find that nature is some type of God, but you won't find God. So where does the person find God today? This is the Chiddush of Chassidus, that he looks into himself. And this is a very important thing to know, that there have always been very attuned individuals, people that were attuned to themselves and understood how the psyche works. For instance, the whole book of Proverbs is basically a psychological book. It describes different facets of human psychology. But the regular person on the street was not interested or not aware that he had an inner world. It's not that the inner world was invented 200 years ago. It always existed. But it wasn't a topic. It wasn't something that was open to everybody. And the Rabbi writes in one of his sichos that the very fact that there's so much interest in the inner world, in the psychology, in our own psychology and how we function. It's the same thing as asking about how the world functions. And so we're asking about ourselves, how do we function? That itself is one of the signs of the redemption. That's the meaning of the verse in that says, "V'atem harei Yisrael anfechem titenu ufiryechem tisau," that the hills of Israel will be covered by trees and by fruit, and fruit will be covered with fruit. So the explanation, the literal explanation would be that somehow Israel was barren, and now that we're back in the land of Israel, so it's fruitful again. I don't know. I don't know if that's entirely true, but let's say that it is. The inner meaning of this verse, like everything that a prophet says, he's using a metaphor for something. And it's explained that in the Torah, when you talk about trees, you're talking about man's psyche, man's soul. Because there's a pasuk by Moshe Rabbeinu who says very clearly the connection. He says, "Ki adam etz hasadeh," because man is the tree of the field. And so there's a likening between the soul and between a tree. And when the prophet says that the hills will bear fruit, so apart from the literal meaning, he of course means something metaphoric. What he means is that the psyche will bear fruit, meaning that by looking at the psyche, by looking inside, you'll find Hashem. So what does it mean that you look inside? So you look inside and you feel that Hashem is not just the creator who created the world, but he's the very life force that's flowing through you. And when a person comes to feel that, to admit that, then he comes to love the life force that's giving him life, that's keeping him alive. In the same way that every person who's healthy loves himself. But instead of just loving himself as a vague concept, you focus on the fact that there's something inside that is alive in you. It's giving you life at this very moment. So one way of looking at it is like the breath. that you keep breathing all the time, or the heartbeat. These are all elements of Ratzon Hashem, the run and return of a pulse of life inside the person. That you do by meditating on something. So here it's meditating, it used to be in the Rambam's time, meditating on creation, and by Chassidus it's more meditating on how Hashem flows through you, how the life force is in you. Okay, so that is all is called Nu Ava. How do we say it in the Amida? In the Amida we say Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avoteinu. Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avoteinu. Blessed are you Hashem, our God and the God of our fathers. By saying our God, what do you say about our God? Meaning my God, the one that I came to discover, the way I discovered him. So in that sense it's new, because every person has a separate experience of how Hashem is giving him life. That's called Ahavat Olam in this case. In this mimer he's going to call it Ahavat Olam. But there's another type of love, which is an inheritance from our fathers. It was there always. And in this week's parsha, basically Yosef becomes one of the patriarchs in a certain sense. He's not like a patriarch, there's only three of them, but he's the one who's responsible for the light of the infinite penetrating into a person. And in that sense, this is a higher love. That's what we learned last time. It's concealed, you don't see it, and you're supposed to dig it up, you're supposed to find it. And when you find it, it's considered by him to be, in this mimer, a higher type of love. Okay? So let's see again from Vesh B'chinat Shniya. This is the 10th line from the top. Vesh B'chinat Shniya B'ava, v'o nikra Ava Mesotera, the concealed love. She'eh ahava she'esh b'teva toldat hanefesh ha'elokit. She'eh chafetza b'tiva litkalel b'Ein Sof Baruch Hu. And this type of love, it contradicts the love that a person feels when he experiences the life force flowing through him, because the life force flowing through me is the feeling that I want to be alive. Here, this love, the concealed love, is a love where a person is willing to give up his life in order to join back into the infinite. And that's the concealed love. In that sense, you can see why it comes from a higher place. Because it yearns to go back into the Ein Sof. So if you go back to the usual terminology that the Alter Rebbe uses in his book, so the higher love is Sovev, comes from the Sovev, and the lower love comes from the Memalech. Okay, that's how you would normally think about it. We'll see in a moment that it's a little bit more complex, and he introduces one term that is very useful for many things in Chassidus. It's called Reishit HaKav, the beginning of the line, or beginning of the ray. We'll see this in a minute. So this second love is also naturally in the person, but it comes from the divine soul directly, and it's concealed. And it yearns to go back to its source in the Ein Sof, in the infinite. It too comes out only through meditation, through learning Torah. When we say meditation, we always mean learning Torah. By meditating on what you learn, by understanding what you learn. And this is the topic of the Tanya. This is not called a new thing that came into the world, because it was just concealed. Because the other type of love, that was really new. That's something that's unique to each individual. It's unique in each generation. And that one comes directly, it's born directly from the mind, from the Chokhmah and Bina, the wisdom and the understanding, which are like a mother and father in the mind. This type of love is not born, so where is it coming from? It's really coming from the Keter. It's really coming from the highest source, which is the super consciousness, the crown. And it's only revealed from העלם לגידול. Okay, so this is the point to add two more terms, which when you're learning Chassidus at a high level, you have to learn these terms. You can't, or at least a level where you don't skip words because you don't understand them. So these two terms, מהעלם אל הגילוי, from concealment to revelation, it's important to know that when the Alter Rebbe came out of his second incarceration, on the fifth candle of Hanukkah, and I believe the year was Tafresh Tet. So which Tet was it? Like the Tanya, same year. Taf Kuf Tzaddik Tet. Tanya was Taf Kuf Tzaddik Zayin. I'm missing something here. And then Taf Kuf Pei Zayin, and then Taf Kuf Pei Tet. In any case, it was sometime in the 1800 something. It comes out 1809, I think. And he passed away.
1860, he passed away.
No, he passed away Taf Kuf Ayin Gimel, which was 1813. He passed away in 1813. So.
Is it the Alter Rebbe?
Baal Shem Tov passed away in 1660, in 1760. The Alter Rebbe passed away in 1813, and I believe this was 10 years. It was about 6 years before. 6 years. What?
Yom.
The Rebbe then fixed it. That it's in the fifth. It was a big question the whole time whether it was the third candle or fifth candle. In the end, after he wrote the Yom Yom, he wrote in the 40s, and then in the 60s he said he researched it some more, and he came to the conclusion that it was on the fifth candle of Hanukkah. It's a big deal. He made a big deal out of it when he announced this. So, if I'm not mistaken, Tafresh Pei. So Tafresh Pei was 1809. He was a second time in jail. And when he came out, that's when he really began to explain Chassidus. It's a very, very deep thing. Until then, it can't be. What do I say? I don't know. Find the year. I don't remember what the year is. But it's only a few years before he passed away. Mm-hmm. And then he really opened up. And he said one mimer that the Friedrich Rebbe...
1800.
1800, it was the second time? Okay. So it's 1799. That's how it comes out in years.
5569.
5569?
1.
Samech Aleph. Tafkuf Samech Aleph.
He writes in your room and said me.
Why would that all wrong in my head? I don't know why. Okay, I have to fix my dates. In any case, when he came out, the Friedrich Rebbe said that he said this one mimer that appears in the Siddur that the Middle Rebbe wrote, and it's on Ashrei. It's in the middle of Ashrei. Zecher Rav Tovcha Yavil. It's called Dibur Matchil Zecher Rav Tovcha Yavil. This was the first mimer that he said when he came out, and that's when he felt that he now had to completely explain everything. That he couldn't hold back from all the wide and deep explanations for what Chassidus was. And so he introduced in that mimer, it's not the first time he said it, but it was the first time he explained it in depth. He introduced the difference between העלם וגילוי and עצם והתפשטות. העלם וגילוי means that something is concealed becomes revealed, and עצם והתפשטות means that something is itself and then it extends. So it appears by extension, not by just appearing. What's the difference between the two? The biggest difference between the two is that the world of Atzilus is העלם וגילוי. The world of emanation, the world of tzaddikim, the world of higher consciousness of Hashem, is only the difference between whether Hashem is concealed or revealed. Mm-hmm. The three lower worlds, Bria, Yetzirah, Siyar, are considered an extension of the Etzem. And interestingly, when you talk about העלם וגילוי, because he hints to it in the Tanya, but he doesn't spell it out in these words. When you talk about the world of Atzilus as just being a revelation of the העלם is not the same as the Etzem. They don't refer to the same aspect of Hashem, of God. When I say Hashem has העלם, I mean that he cannot reveal himself. So he concealed himself. So there's some kind of העלם. Okay. When I say עצם והתפשטות, I'm talking about the very essence of the word, the thing in and of itself. There's no word in English for etzem. It's one of the words that, for who knows what reason, was not carried over from the Greek. I don't remember what it is in Greek. In Hebrew, it's etzem. So when the Tibunim came to translate the Rambam and Rav Tzaddik and so on, so they had this word in Arabic, because in Arabic they had translated it from Greek, and they took the Hebrew equivalent, which is etzem, the thing in and of itself. So when I say that there's an extension, it's actually from a higher place in Hashem than when I talk about העלם וגילוי, concealment and revealment. So in the world of tzaddikim, the world of emanation, atzilus, even though it's higher, there's less revelation of the etzem. It's not the etzem that's being revealed. It's the העלם that's being revealed. In other words, the tzaddik is somebody who, when he sees this, he doesn't see this. He sees how this which conceals everything we have here reveals to him Hashem's light. But it's only his light.
Yeah.
In the lower world, creation, formation, and action, the etzim extends. So that actions that are done here are actually an extension of Hashem himself. He hints at this in the Tanya. He says that Hashem forsook. He gave up on all the spiritual world in order to create this lower world. And what he wants is really this lower world. So he hints at it. He sort of says it, but he doesn't use this terminology. Anyway, it's a big mimer, and then it's developed tremendously in Chassidus, this concept of the difference between Atzilus. How do you explain the difference between Atzilus and Bia? And Bria Yetzirah Asiyah is this difference between העלם וגילוי and etzem v'itpashtus. So this is like maybe, and again, this is when he came out of the second imprisonment and he felt that he had this urgency to fully explain everything that's going on in Chassidus and what's going on. Those were the two sets of terms that he began using, and he explained them in length, feeling that this would really bring things into people's understanding. So here, he's using the terms העלם וגילוי for this higher type of love, which only came out of concealment. Meaning, in other words, it's the love that relates to the world of emanation. That's why he connects it to the divine soul. Because the divine soul is from the world of emanation. That's the tzaddik in each person. The divine soul that I have in me, my nefesh elokis, is really my tzaddik, who I am. And sometimes when a person needs to ask a tzaddik, so he can ask his divine soul.
See, the problem I have with this is it starts to sound a lot like the concept that the Buddhists are trying to convey.
How's that?
To connect within your inner godliness, so that it's
Just
all.
because they say it doesn't mean it's wrong.
It's all within the eye. Everything's contained within the eye. That's the whole
You're the
derech.
opposite. You're the opposite.
How?
Because my inner tzaddik is not the etzem of Hashem. It's not the same thing.
It's not an etzem of
Hashem.
Hashem, but it's
Same thing, no. They mean that whatever's inside you, that's the etzem. We mean, by the way, that the only time that you touch the etzem is when you do a mitzvah.
right.
And in meditation and looking into myself and my divine soul, all I see is the העלם וגילוי. I only see this level of the world of emanation. This, by the way, is it's a big revolution in thinking, because usually you think that emanation is much higher. Again, he says it in the Tanya, and I don't know how people read it, but he says he forsook. I mean, he skipped over all the spiritual worlds. Why? Because the spiritual worlds only reveal, but they don't extend the thing in and of itself. They're not an extension of himself. What makes this world so special for him? Because here he can dwell. How does he dwell here? Not dwell inside,
us.
in the mitzvah.
But aren't we the extension of Hashem in this world?
The mitzvah is.
The mitzvah is.
The mitzvah is the extension. The action is the extension. He said, of course it needs you. You're part of the mitzvah.
Right.
But there it's like Rabbi likes to explain it, that it's not that there was a cow and there were grasses and there was a human, so you can give a mitzvah called tefillin. because you make the...
Yeah.
Okay? That's rather the other way around. It was a mitzvah called tefillin, and then, so for that you need a human being. Okay, it doesn't mean that the Jewish people come after the mitzvot. What he means is that the physical form that we take is in order to fulfill that mitzvah. That everything is serving the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Okay?
The mitzvah becomes the impetus.
Okay, the impetus for how, the motivation for, or the form,
For the
according
form.
to which
Impetus for the form.
everything
Yeah.
is created in order to serve that purpose. Okay, so that's the Heilem Ugdul here. So this is one of the biggest topics in the in Chassidus, Heilem Ugdul and Etzem V'Itpashtut. But this is just the first taste, and if I'm not mistaken, it's almost the first time that you said this here, but I don't remember. And that's what the sages mean when they say that wine goes in and the secret comes out. So this big secret is this concealed love. And it comes out by meditation, again, by meditating on Torah. And that's called yain, yeina shel Torah. What does it mean in Torah? Not just a regular nigla that a person learns, but how it is in the inner dimension of the Torah, how it is in the call it the Kabbalah of it, or whatever. ובאמת מעלת ומדרגת האהבה הזו המסותרת היא גדולה ורבה מבחינת האהבה הנולדת מהתבוננות עליו. So this type of love is actually higher than the type of love that is unique to each one of us, that comes out of our own thinking, out of our own mind. Okay? Because it comes from a higher place. It comes from the world of emanation.
Because we're limited in what we could possibly think.
Right. Even though the love that comes out of our own minds is new, it's unique. And this type of love that came down from the world of emanation, that came down through Yosef, as we'll see, so it's been planted here. It's
transmission.
It's not something entirely new. We explained that something that the lower it goes, the higher its source. And the lower it falls, the higher was its source. So this love that actually came down lower, and by the way, where is it contained? It's contained in the heart. And the other type of love begins from the mind, and it goes down to the heart. So actually this one seems to be lower. The concealed love that he's talking about, that he wants to say Yosef is giving us. So he says this concealed love is in the heart directly. You only discover it with your mind, but you're not creating it with your mind. The other type of love, which is the love that most people pursue in looking for God, is I'm going to look, I'm going to see what I understand, what I think, and so on. And what we explained before, even that the person feels his own life force as being a part of God. All this originates entirely from the mind. It's like it doesn't have a higher source, as it were. Of course, it also has a higher source, because the mind has a higher source. But in the person's experience, here I'm discovering something that seemed to always have been here. It's a treasure trove, basically, and I just revealed it.
Silver.
So all this we saw. I'm skipping the parentheses. He'll come back to this. You have to understand, in the Tanya, everything is relative. In the Tanya, in Chassidus, everything is relative. Relative means that he'll say Ahava Rabba and Ahavat Olam, higher love and worldly love, or supernal love and mundane love, and he uses these for every single time that he'll talk about two different types of love, and one is higher than the other. You can't get hooked on the terms that he uses for love, because there's 13 different types of love. Love is equal to 13, so there's 13 different types of love. And anytime he wants to relate two of them and say one is higher than the other, he'll call the one supernal and the other mundane. And it doesn't matter what he's talking about. So it's true that there is a specific type of love called Ahavat Olam. That's the type of love that comes out of meditating on the world. And there is a type of love that's specifically called Ahava Rabba, and that's whatever type of love is given to you as a gift from above that you didn't create. It's true that those are set terms. But elsewhere, he'll just use Ahava Rabba and Ahavat Olam as just relative. It's just saying one is higher than the other. A lot of people get stuck on this, both in the Tanya and wherever else he writes.
By the way, you mentioned here that whatever appears lower comes from a higher place.
Mm-hmm.
This is corresponding to the hierarchy of the man, animal, and plant life. Yeah, it's the same concept.
והנה בחינת המדרגת יוסף הצדיק עליון הוא בחינת אהבה רבה מסותרת שיש בכל נפש מישראל. So Yosef is the one who's responsible, or he represents the type of love that came from above, from the infinite, from the Ein Sof, from Atzilus, and he's the concealed love that's in the soul of every Jew. ששורשה גבוה מאוד נעלה, and whose source is very high, like we just said in the infinite. שזהו בחינת יוסף, שהוא בחינת יסוד, דהיינו בחינת יוד סוד. So the whole point of Yosef is that Yosef is a secret himself. What secret is he holding? He's holding the secret of the infinite, the Yud. The first letter that comes out of the infinite is the Yud. So that's how you read his name. Yud Sod, Yosef. Sorry, his sphere, Yisod. V'zeu perush ol zaru ala tzaddik. And that's the meaning of the pasuk that we say every Erev Shabbos. That came from the Ramak to say these 6 kapitla of Tehillim. Ol zaru ala tzaddik. That light is sown for the tzaddik, meaning it's concealed in the ground for the tzaddik. Shu b'chinat ol kadma'a shegnazo latzaddikim. This is the first light that Hashem brought into being. Okay. And where did he put it? He concealed it in the Torah. He concealed it inside the tzaddikim. 2 different explanations. But in any case, it means that he concealed it in the world of Atzilus. He put it in the world of emanation. And the tzaddik reveals it. So a lot of times, so this all, what all is this? This is the first revelation of Hashem, which became, says Rashi, and that's how the Chazal understand it, that the first light was good to be concealed, good to be hidden.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's not the etzim.
Too good to be revealed.
It's a revelation of Hashem. It's the first revelation of Hashem. It's a direct revelation, but it's not the etzim. It's not Hashem in and of himself. It's just the light of Hashem. And this light was concealed. And who discovers this light?
Tzaddikim.
The tzaddikim and the Torah. The Torah is this light. It's concealed inside.
So the Torah, so the light came into the world already enclosed.
No, it came into the world and it revealed Hashem directly. But Hashem decided to conceal it. So when we talk about the world of Atzilus being העלם וגילוי, concealment and revelation, we're talking specifically about this first light, יביעו ויהיו.
Did Adam Arishan see a revealed light? No.
Yes, he did. You use this light to see from end to end of the world. Because what is this? It's the first revelation of Hashem. So it's how a person would conceive of Hashem from beginning to end. Ani rishon v'ani achron. I'm the first and I'm the last. It's the first time that Hashem decided to reveal himself. But it's not the etzim. It's only what he appears as. And this is the world of emanation.
Okay, so will this be the representation of Hashem after Mashiach comes?
Okay. It's what will be revealed. That this light will be revealed all the time.
So the question has to be, how could Adam Arishan sin if Hashem is revealed?
So we still have free choice because there's lower worlds.
So you're saying that after Mashiach comes, we will still have an opportunity to sin?
Not sin in the sense that we understand it today. Yes, it will still be free choice. The free will be on a whole different level.
No, I understand. If a melech is standing there over your head with a sword, you're not going to be stealing.
Say it like this. The problem with the world today, why do you need a tzaddik? Because most people have a very narrow sense of what the world is about. Okay?
Yep.
Why? Because this original light, which goes from beginning to end, is concealed. It's not revealed. What does it mean it's not revealed? You have no context. So what do you see? You see your 70 years, 80 years, 100 years, 200 years, however long you live. And you see them as what the world is. That's how you understand the world. You can't understand it beyond the confines.
Yeah.
So because of that, for instance, you've got this. Let's say the worst example of this: a person who needs to survive, so he's willing to even kill in order to survive. Because you're looking at the world as being your life. But if you would see everything in context, so you would see that even if your life was short, but you didn't kill, it was more worthwhile for the whole story than what you did. Okay? By narrowing your ability to see, you also narrow your concept of what life is about. So the whole story of history from Adam, from the first sin until now, is a story of narrow-mindedness, small-mindedness. That's what it means. A tzaddik is a person who always sees the big picture. It's not the Clinton or Obama or Trump see the big picture. It doesn't matter how high up you go in whatever ranks of the world there are, because they're still just seeing a small, narrow picture. The United States is 300 years old. Say also, they see the whole picture of the United States. Very nice. The world is almost
Maybe.
6,000 years old. Maybe, right? They can hold it in their minds. But the higher up you go in consciousness, the more you see the bigger picture of what the right thing to do now is from the perspective of everything together. That's what it means to use the original light. That's what it means that when somebody came to the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov would open up the Zohar and look and give him an answer. What do you see in the Zohar? What's the connection? He doesn't see the answer in the Zohar. The answer is not in the Zohar. But he uses the Zohar to elevate his own consciousness to the world of emanation. And when he's at the world of emanation, now he can see what this question means in the bigger picture.
In the context. But that's exactly precisely the point. You're saying that we're limited by our finiteness right now, being able to see the bigger picture, and therefore our free choices, we think it's there to help us survive, essentially. But after Mashiach comes, we will have a sense of eternity, because
we'll see from
eternal.
beginning to end.
We're going to see from beginning to end. So we're really going to be put in the same context, as it were, as Adam Arishan was in.
Right.
So my question is,
You can still ignore that. You can say, this story that Hashem wrote, very nice. I now see the whole story. And I have a better story. And what's that called? It's called humanism.
Humanism.
Humanism. Something that is got from yesterday. That Rabbi says very nicely that Haman represents what's so terrible about Amalek. That his last living offspring that we know of was Haman. What does Haman represent? Humanism. He says there's the Hashem story, there's my story. And there'll still be free choice. You still get to choose. Hashem says, you either choose my story, you now see the whole story. You want it, you don't want it. You want to be part of it, or you want to create your own story. And even when you create your own story,
You still need my story as a basis for any story. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
humanism says no. You
No,
gave
where
me
you gonna
free
go?
will. You gave me free will. Your problem. I don't have to relate to you anymore. That's basically what humanism says. Humanism doesn't really think.
It defies logic.
Not entirely. In any case, that's what it means that in the future there'll only be Purim, and Purim will be the only
Right.
mitzvah left. Because that conundrum will still exist. That question will still exist in people's minds. Is it me or Hashem? Who is it now? That you'll have to recognize Hashem. You'll see the whole story. You'll understand what it means that Hashem planned this all. What's going on.
So that is Pachad Yitzchak. And
Then you become fear. But about Amalek, it says he's the power in the soul to say, Yodea et kuno umitkaven limod bo. He knows God, and yet he rebels against him. Why? Because he feels I'm better. I have a better story to tell. Say it. Let's see what the story is. Again, Hashem is not against you telling your story. It's just a question of how you feel towards Him while you're telling your story.
Right.
So that needs a lot more explanation about what that is in the nefesh. But certainly you can see that's meaning that until now, all the terrible things that were done in the world, they were done out of narrow-mindedness. They weren't done really out of real humanism. They really didn't put man over God.
They're
Because
interested, self-interest.
because
Self-interest.
It was just narrow-mindedness. Yeah, the worst things that were done. So the Arizal doesn't have a problem in taking the worst things that were done and introducing them into the plan and saying, well, this was part of the plan, and here's what came out of it. Could it have been done differently? Yes. Hashem's plans are not exactly. We talked a little about this yesterday. Hashem's plans are not that you make a 30-year plan and you build a product. That's not how Hashem works. Because He's got free will in the whole story. So it's much more complex than that. But in any case, it could have been done differently. But now that it was done this way, this is also part of the divine intent. You have to understand how. So the Arizal comes and he explains how this was also part of the divine intent. Okay? So this whole thing, how do we get into this? Because I want to say that all that is just the light. It's just the light of understanding. But when you do a mitzvah, it's far beyond that first light. It's not that first light at all. The mitzvah is darkness in a certain sense. That's why the initial concept of the world of creation is called borei choshen. It's darkness relative to the light that Hashem created on the first day, not created, but brought into being, and He revealed Himself on the first day, and that's what the tzaddikim use in the world of emanation. The mitzvah is like darkness. What's the connection? When a person does a mitzvah, what he gets some incredible knowledge of what the context of his life is about. Nothing. You don't get anything. It's all darkness then. But you should know that this is an extension of Hashem Himself. Why is it dark? In the same way that Hashem is dark. Not dark because He's really dark. He's the greatest light. But it's dark because it's incomprehensible. You can't understand the infinite within it. That's the power of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is an extension, not a revelation, but an extension of the etzem.
Shneur.
Nadal mitzvah tzniut. It says that the beauty of the mitzvah is its modesty.
Yeah.
It seems like something so simple, like it's nothing, and it's dark, and it's there's nothing there. It's incomprehensible.
There's no feedback.
Yet this is, and there's no feedback. Nothing comes out of it. And this is the extension of Hashem. That's one of the most important chidushim that came out of the Yביעו, out of that mimer. That in the end, and by the way, the whole Tanya was trying to say that, but he said it much better in Yביעו. You get it from the Tanya at some level, but you don't get it like the way. Once he began to explain העלם וגילוי and עצם והתפשטות, and he explained that mitzvot are עצם והתפשטות, and they're not העלם וגילוי, it's not like Torah. So suddenly you understand, wait a minute, this is much higher. That's why the Baal Shem Tov loved simple Jews. Because he said in the end, a simple Jew who's doing a mitzvah is much higher than the greatest tzaddik. It's much, much higher. It's a completely different level. It's not higher because it's higher. It's a different world altogether. The worlds of Liadi, Yביעו, they're an extension of the etzem when a person does a mitzvah. It's 1,000,000 times more powerful. So it's very nice to know. It's all very good, the knowledge of Torah and so on, to understand Hashem's purpose and what He wants and so on. It's all very important. But there's nothing like the mitzvah itself. Okay, so that's we'll continue. I want to finish this tomorrow because I do want to get to the.